Welcome back to the Telosive EV podcast. I am joined with Mach E Mike, his new official name for this episode. Kind of a bonus one.
I don't own a Mach E, Mike. No. Or I don't own a Mach E, Mike. I don't own a Mach E.
We normally don't do multiple episodes within a week, but this is breaking news considering Mike was able to get his hands on a Mach E to test drive, and you and your wife got to check it out, right?
She didn't get to drive it, but yeah, she got to sit in the passenger, and we drove around the neighborhood a little bit and tested it out.
Cool. And the deliveries have officially begun, as I've seen. People are finally getting... It was a few months late, but they got them there. They're finally delivering them. And I guess this is the whole subject. So what'd you think? How was it? Is it amazing?
I think it was really cool.
Yeah?
Yeah. To preface, at the Sunnyvale Ford location, they have swaths of them. They have hundreds of them in the back waiting to be delivered.
Okay.
I didn't get to see them, but the service rep that I was talking to was saying that there's a whole bunch of them in the back. We couldn't see them, of course, because they're customer only. They already had an owner, and they were just waiting for delivery. But there were 4 of them that I was able to see with my own eyes, and I could physically touch, I guess, if I wanted to. One of them was in the showroom that was the red color. Oh, yeah, definitely. And then, yeah, so there's the red one in the showroom, and then 3 of them outside, 2 red and 1 blue. So it sounds like a lot of people are loving the red, or red is just the default color, maybe because Mustang red is an iconic color.
True.
But the blue one was definitely almost like a discount Shelby blue. It was a lot brighter than the Shelby blue. Shelby blue is a little bit darker.
Okay.
Almost like a Ford F-150, kind of in that realm, if that helps everyone out. But this one was more electric blue, and it's exclusive for the first editions.
Oh,
which
wow.
I found interesting because I loved it. The moment I saw it, I'm like, this is a beautiful color.
You like that more saturated, vibrant blue.
Yeah, I don't really like Tesla's blue, which is a little bit darker for my taste.
It's a bit
even
too
my
dark.
wife, when we were choosing the Model Y color, when we first reserved it back in March of 2019, it was trying to figure out, okay, what color would be good. And her focus was more on fingerprints. Mine was on, we're going to be owning this for a long time. What color am I fine with having forever?
True.
Am I going to be fine with having to clean it every week just to make it look good? Or is it all right if there's dust on it and it looks all right? So that's why we went with the Midnight Silver Metallic, because less fingerprints and dust doesn't really appear too much.
Sure.
Like, it's not too obvious on it.
Yeah.
Anyways, getting back to the Mach E, this blue is beautiful looking. Definitely going to get a lot of dust on it and very noticeable. But very beautiful, very electric blue, and it was fantastic to see.
And how was it like not having door handles to grab when you first walk up to it?
So what was even more interesting is the service rep gives me the fob. I'm like, oh, a fob. I forgot about these, because at least with Teslas, you can get a fob, but by default, it's either your key card or your phone. Which actually I had to use the key card the other day. For some reason, the phone wasn't working. So it's nice to have the backup key card with you.
Sure.
Anyways, they give me the fob, very basic fob. On the back, it says Ford. On the front, it's got the typical unlock, lock, and emergency
So it doesn't look
button.
like a little car.
No, it's more like a regular oblong, what would it be, like an oval?
Yeah, traditional fob.
Definitely.
Okay.
And but yeah, got to go. I approached the vehicle. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. There's no door handles. You press a button, and then the door kind of ejects itself a little bit, and then you pull on the little driver tab. And so got to do that, and it wasn't a problem at all. It was gazoon-tight. It seemed very natural to just press the button and open it up. It wasn't a problem at all. I could see getting used to that real easily.
Yeah.
And then stepping into it, it's like, oh, there's 2 screens. One that's vertical, that's a good size. It's not as big as like the Model S or X, or the previous Model S and X. It didn't seem that large, but enough to where it's like, okay, I got some screen to play with. And then the heads-up display behind the driver's seat or driver wheel, which was good. It was a really good quality. It looked very nice, and driving with that in front of me, it was very helpful with kind of seeing the speed and what was going on and all the weird animations that pop up when you engage, was it unbridled mode?
Unbridled mode?
It's the sport mode for
Oh,
the Mach E, because the Mach E is a Mustang, and Mustangs, of course, are horses, and you ride horses, and they are bridled. So when you unbridle the horse, it is more
so that's what the
crazy, I
software
guess.
actually calls it?
It calls it unbridled. There's Whisper. I forget what the second one is, and unbridled.
Did it feel,
There's also a
like, size-wise, did it feel bigger or smaller than the Model Y, or pretty on par?
It felt on par. I don't know what the dimensions are off the top of my head for the Mach E, but getting into it, it was very familiar.
Okay.
Besides having the big vertical screen and then the screen behind the steering wheel, I
Sure.
go to look in and I'd see the what's it called? The glass roof, because it has a glass roof as well. I'm like, oh,
Good.
this is very familiar.
Yeah.
And then I kind of look behind my shoulder at the back, and it's basically the same look and feel of like, oh, I don't have too much room to look out the back back glass.
Right.
Because the pillars and just how the shape is of the Mach E, where it's more of a compact, almost sloped body style, even though it's got a little bit of that hidden bodywork to make it seem like it's more sloped.
Yeah, I noticed that. They kind of darken the top piece.
Yeah, but otherwise, no, it felt very similar in size to the Model Y. The only thing that kind of tipped me off when I was driving it is, of course, it's not the Model Y, so I don't have too much of a gauge of how big the vehicle is. Like if I'm driving around a grocery store parking lot, I pretty much know down to an inch where my car is.
Yeah.
Where at the Mach E, of course, it's a new vehicle, and I haven't been in it before, and it was a little bit more. I mean, it wasn't my car either, so I was a little bit more careful.
Sure. Understandably so. So which trim did you get to test drive?
It was the first edition premium all-wheel drive. It sounds like, from what the service rep was saying, is that Ford wants to go more all-wheel drive than rear-wheel drive.
Yeah, sounds
I
like
don't know
Tesla.
if that's to compete. Yeah, I was about to say, I don't know if they're trying to compete with Tesla, or maybe they just don't want to do rear-wheel drive for some reason. But it sounds like they're still supporting rear-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Their options page on their website currently still reflects that. But it sounded like from the service rep that they're going to be focusing more on all-wheel drive for most of the options. I guess what he was trying to hint at was that if you walk up to a dealership for Ford and you want to buy a Mach E without having to do all the reconfiguration stuff online, and kind of like the typical Tesla thing, right? You configure it online, and then you get your car.
Right.
With them, it's more like, okay, we'll fill up all of the dealerships with all-wheel drives and kind of incentivize the all-wheel drive to customers. But if they want a rear-wheel drive, they can opt for it, but it's going to take a little bit longer, and they have to custom order it.
I got you. Okay. So, man, you were going from a dual-motor Tesla crossover to a dual-motor Ford crossover in one move. So that's why I think your perspective should be pretty interesting, considering you're one of the few people who can say, well, close to say, I've driven a Model Y for about a year now.
Yeah. It's almost been a year. It'll start in April, early April.
So, yeah, we're almost there. You're pretty close to reaching the 1 year mark. So is regen a bit different in the Mach E?
I'm glad you asked, honestly.
Because I imagine
going
going from a Tesla to another vehicle, that's like the first thing you have to adjust to.
Yeah, I'd say driving, comparison between my Model Y and my wife's Ford, or not Ford, she doesn't own a Ford, the Ram 1500.
Yeah.
Definitely different because, one, it's a huge vehicle, it's a truck, and two, it's a typical gas vehicle that doesn't really have regen, but it's got a whole lot of mass. With the Mach E, it's a lot more similarly sized and probably close to similar weight, maybe a little bit lighter. But when I was driving out of the dealership, it was in more of standard mode, or at least more internal combustion engine friendly mode, where you get that typical, you put your foot on the accelerator pedal and then it kind of keeps on going once you lift off your foot off the accelerator pedal. But I put it into one pedal drive, I think when I was at a stoplight, because I didn't want to keep on holding the brake button, which is brake pedal, which is nice, honestly, because I think I forget in the Tesla if you could actually do that live or like while you're driving, but at least in the Mach E, you could switch to one pedal, and what happens is you don't have to push on the brake anymore. It'll automatically brake itself, which is, I think, standard with Model S or all the Teslas these days.
Yeah.
But it was very comforting knowing that I could switch modes pretty quickly. And for people who want to experience one pedal drive, they can simply press the button while they're driving rather than having to stop, fiddle with the settings, and then try it again and be like, maybe I don't like this, and have to stop and undo the setting.
So on default, that acts more like a traditional car.
Oh, yeah. And it's been a while since I've been in a traditional car that's that size. And so hitting the accelerator pedal was a little bit concerning because it felt like... it felt unbridled, honestly. It was like, oh, I got hit the brake. And so the car was kind of doing the lurching forward, lurching backward because I haven't driven in a internal combustion crossover in a long time.
Yeah.
But one pedal driving, I'd say a lot less strong than the Tesla, but not too far off. It wasn't as predictable as my Y is now, where I can basically measure up how far I am from a stoplight, just let go of the accelerator pedal, and it'll stop once I get to the stoplight. Or when I'm in traffic, I can let off the accelerator pedal, and I slow down enough to where I'm not hitting the car in front of me. Or I'm teasing it. With the Mach E, of course, new vehicle, a little bit tougher trying to gauge what that distance is.
Sure.
But it's definitely a little bit less strong than the Tesla's regen braking. But still comparable, I'd say. I think the Mach E is a really good product in that regard because it's like having a Tesla, but without having a Tesla.
Yeah, sure. If you need that Mustang branding, I guess, of some sort.
Indeed, yeah. And the space wasn't too bad. My wife noticed when she got in, she quickly looked at the rear seats and she exclaimed that there wasn't as much space in the back seat than there is in the Y.
Really?
I don't know whether it's because just how the Mach E is shaped or built, or if there's more cushion to it, because the seats actually felt really good sitting in them. They felt very comfortable. They had also custom stitching, so with the blue one that I was driving, I had blue stitching on the seats, which was beautiful. And
That's
the
cool.
red ones had the red stitching, but I don't know if that's first edition standard or something else.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But yeah, the back seats didn't have as much room. I sat in the back of them a little bit and didn't really, I don't know. I wasn't sitting in the back when I was driving, so I couldn't really gauge whether it was more comfortable or less comfortable, but I could definitely tell that there was less space. So it wasn't as spacious as the Y is, I'd say.
Gotcha. So they're not going to be stuffing a 7-seater option with the Mach E if it's already a bit smaller.
No, and the back, the trunk, definitely doesn't have that nice deep trunk that we've seen in the Y or the 3, the hidden storage. It's got a wheel back there, or at least a lot of equipment back there when you lift up the hidden trunk area.
Oh, it has a spare?
I believe it's got a spare, if I remember correctly.
Wow. Okay.
I took
you don't
some
see that in
footage,
EVs
so
that much. Yeah.
Yeah, it had some support parts in the back. But yeah, I guess the back, it wasn't... I don't know. I like the milk carton spots or cubbies that the Model Y has. I like stuffing things in there, and it's very very secure in there. I find when I have groceries in the Y, they tend to slide back and forth unless it's densely packed in there because it's on a carpeted surface, which is a little bit smooth. But in the Mach E, it doesn't have those cubbies, but it's got a decent amount of width. And it's also got a nice little cover that you can take off. It's basically on strings on the front part of it, connected to, I think, the tailgate top. Okay. And then it's got little hook points on the back end of the tailgate, so that way you can have some privacy for whatever things that you're storing in the back of your Mach E.
Okay, fair enough.
It did come unhooked when I was opening it, which was kind of funny because I opened it and I'm like, wow, there's like no space in this trunk or the back hatch. And I'm like, oh, wait, this is a material. Never mind. It can move.
Okay.
But
Did
yeah,
you get
so
a
it
look at
felt
the
a little
frunk
bit.
at all?
I did at the very end. I didn't get to look at it when I was driving it,
Mm-hmm.
but I had the service representative open it for me at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a decent size. It reminds me of the a little bit of the Model Y, a little bit like wider in both directions.
Okay.
But the divider is a little bit of annoyance to me. You have
Oh.
to, because it's got those little dividers in there. I think Ford made a little video of like, because you can use it as a cooler. It's got some, oh goodness, some plugs basically at the bottom that you could plug and pour water and ice into it, and you can have a nice little tailgate party with your Mustang Mach E using the frunk, which
Wow.
sounds frightening to me just because with the Y, just things sloshing around in the front
Yeah.
could easily overflow. And thinking about the Mach E, it'd have to have a pretty good seal, or at least a decent seal for water and ice not to pour everywhere. But I guess what you do is,
Wow.
I guess, bring your ice in the trunk or whatever, and then when you get to your location, pour it in. Anyways, getting back to it, the divider I wasn't a fan of.
Okay.
You could take that out, but there's little pins that you basically have to pop. It's very similar to, I'd say, almost me taking off the little hidden panel to reveal the tailgate hook, the receiver for putting
Yeah,
a
yeah.
trailer on for the Y. You have
The
to
tow hitch.
the tow hitch. Thank you. Yes, the
Yeah.
word escaped me. But yeah, it felt very like, I don't know. I think if people want to utilize the frunk, which it doesn't sound like Ford wants people to utilize the whole frunk without the divider, they would have, if they wanted to, make it a little bit easier to take out the divider, almost where like there's some small locking mechanisms that aren't as hard as these pins that you have to use a screwdriver or something else to unhook them and potentially damage the plastic.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of
It's an
a bummer.
interesting choice for that part.
Yeah.
But the tailgate party thing's funny to imagine. I guess it's not a tailgate anymore. It's more of a front.
A front gate.
Have a frunk party. Have everybody with their Mach E show up with drinks in the in front. It's one way. There's your crumple zone. You can hear the soda can crunching in the process. But so would you say
All the ice flying
practicality?
everywhere.
Yeah. Would you say practicality wise, with like cubic feet of cargo space, the Mach E is a slight decrease compared to the Y?
I'd say so. Assuming that people aren't utilizing the hidden trunk space in the Y, I'd say maybe it's comparable.
Okay.
The Y kind of has sticking out bodywork that I think is almost eliminated in the 7-seater Model Y, if I remember right. But in the Mach E, it seemed like it had a pretty good amount of space. But if you're factoring in the hidden trunk, or I guess 2 spots of hidden trunk in the Model Y, the Ford is definitely lacking in that regard for space.
Gotcha.
The Model Y seems a lot more spacious in regards, or I guess a lot more storage space compared to the Mach E, which that's all right. It seems like the Mach E is more focused on the Mustang brand, right? 'Cause
Sure.
it's got its in its name, where it's supposed to be a little bit more acceleration focused, even though it's a lot less acceleration than mine, and it seemed like it was the same build. I guess I forgot to mention the price of this one that I drove was comparable to mine, so it was
It's about the same
almost
price?
It was about the same price.
Okay.
The only thing that was probably different is it didn't have full self-driving or something like that.
Gotcha.
I didn't test out Ford's full self-driving if it did, but I mainly focused on the acceleration, the driving feel, and
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask about next. Is performance wise, did you notice a improvement in any regard with handling?
in handling, no, I actually felt a little less tight. It
Really?
almost felt sluggish in terms of handling to me. I don't know whether there's a certain setting I didn't have on, but I put in unbridled, which you'd think it would stiffen up the steering a little bit.
You'd think.
It did feel sturdy and safe on the road, though. I really felt like I was planted to the ground.
Good.
And there wasn't a fear that there's any body roll, or if I was going to careen into a car that if I sharply turned it to the left or right, that the car would suddenly just flip over. It was a solid drive, but yeah, the steering was a little bit sluggish, which I guess compared to the Model Y, in which I drive in standard. I don't drive it in sport mode.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are interested. So it disappointed me in that regard.
Yeah, what do you think the
But
cause of that is exactly?
I don't know, because I know that at least on Tesla's side of things, you can, or at least on any automotive side of things, you can stiffen up the steering, and that's what I
Right.
like about the Model Y is it feels like I have a not a roadster like a Tesla Roadster, but like a typical like automotive roadster, but packaged in a compact SUV, which I love because it's
Right.
got the utility that I want, but it's got the sportiness that I like. With the Mach E, it seemed just a little bit toned down. It didn't seem like a total sacrifice in terms of like it didn't have any performance. I think it's a really, I would compare it to my wife's Mustang that she had in high school.
Okay.
It
Good.
had a pretty good amount of acceleration, probably more honestly, because it's electric drivetrain.
Sure.
But the acceleration, yeah, a little bit less fast or what
Quick
am I
is the
trying to look
term.
for? Yes, quick.
Did you
All
do
the-
a 0 to
all the
60 with
terms.
it?
I did a 0 to 60 pretty much. Yeah, we got onto a road and we are going like 5 miles per hour, so a 5 to 60, I guess. And
Gotcha. Okay.
how my wife described it, which is pretty funny, she described it as it's not as quick in the initial acceleration, like when you're going from like 5 to 20 miles per hour.
Yeah.
But I think the last maybe 3/4 of the drive of the acceleration, it starts picking up. But then I realized when she said that, that's very similar to a internal combustion engine car, right? When you plant your foot on the ground, there's not that instant reaction of the car to go, okay, I'm going. It's more like, okay, I have to rev up and then I'm going, which
Interesting.
the Mach E felt like a bit. So that's why I think this product will be great for a lot of people who don't want to go the Tesla route, but they want to go the electric route because it feels
Sure.
very familiar to what they drive today. A little bit not too laggy in the acceleration, but I don't know. Maybe this is coming from someone who's a little bit spoiled by the dual motor all-wheel drive Y.
And you don't have the acceleration boost, just for the record.
I do not have the acceleration boost. Mine goes, I think, 4.8, 0 to 60. So it's not as sporty
hypothetically,
as
you
what's
could
out there.
one day make your Model Y go even faster than it does today. Where I don't think Mach E
If
is
I-
planning to do something like that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I know that there's a lot of car companies that want to go the software route, kind of like Tesla. But the way that Tesla manages efficiency and is able to squeeze out that much more acceleration out of their vehicles definitely makes them a more unique product. But yeah, with Ford, I'm not too sure, honestly.
It'd be interesting if they did follow
Yeah.
through with that. But yeah, I think I kind of get why people are. I get why people are excited for that, and I also get why people wouldn't want to do that. Because on one side of the argument, I see people say, I used to spend thousands of dollars on my car, and I would have to spend hours hooking it up to get it to go a little bit faster and all these modifications. Now you're saying I can do all that from my phone, and I just get an update and it goes faster. But on the other hand, it's like every Model Y is capable of doing that, like hardware-wise. It's literally just a flip of a switch for Tesla, which I think makes it less, what's the word? Less satisfactory when you when you do know that your car is technically being software limited from going that extra boost, and you basically are just paying the manufacturer to get rid of that little. Because when you're modifying your car with actual hardware, you know that I'm making it as fast as it can possibly go. Whereas if you're driving your Model Y without the acceleration boost, you know this is technically not as fast as it can actually go. It's just a piece of code that says don't actually go that fast. So I get why. Like, I wouldn't do it if I were in your situation. I'd be like $2,000 so I could go a little bit faster. No thanks. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who have gotten it, and that's been pure profit for Tesla. So I could see in the future maybe Ford wanting to follow that route, but I mean, they've already ticked off a lot of people with the Mach E in branding. So
Yeah, so I guess for preface as well, this is a car when it was announced, my wife was furious. She is a huge supporter of the Mustang brand. Like I said, she owned one in high school and she loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And through between whenever she started loving Mustangs back in grade school up to right before we got the Model Y, or I guess maybe midway through 2020 with the Model Y,
Mm.
she was convinced that she was going to get a Mustang one day. She really thought that she was going to revisit that, maybe get a 2008 Mustang that has low miles on it when we're
Sure.
like 30 or 40.
Mm-hmm.
And she was really looking forward to that day. But then we got the Y, and it slowly grew on her to the point where now these days she's been like, I don't think I need a Mustang anymore. Like the Y is already, it's already got the acceleration that I want. It just isn't as sporty and low as the Mustang was because it's not a cramped two door.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, seeing the Mach E, she just thought this was the worst thing ever because it's
Really?
almost like,
Yeah.
honestly, yeah, she really hated it. She just thought, why are they applying the Mustang brand to a crossover? Like, that's not Mustang. Mustang is low profile, kind of high performance, more of like medium performance, sporty look
Sure.
of this really cool and has a nice grunt to it whenever you accelerate. That is unique to it. And then them to just put it into the Mach E, she was just like, just drop the Mustang name. Like, why would you call it that? And it's something that I've caught myself as well kind of following with is I don't call it the Mustang Mach E. I don't call it the Ford Mustang Mach E. I just call it the Mach E.
I
Which
do
think
too.
Ford should have just definitely gone with that name of just Mach E because that's unique, that's different, and it makes it sound, I don't know, at least I think they were a little bit too afraid coming to market with a electric crossover that was supposed to go against the ID4, or I guess they didn't know that. Maybe they knew that the ID4 was coming, but at least the Model Y, they knew that that was
Sure.
coming. And so
My brother-in-law
okay,
was
well,
the same way, for the record. He was a big Mustang fan. He works on Mustangs, and he's driven tons over the course of his life. And when we finally met up after the Mach-E was unveiled, he was just like, exact same wording. He was like, "Yeah, that looks great. I'm sure it's a great car. Why'd they call it a Mustang, though?" Just like, what if of all things you could have called it, you had to bring like. There's never been like a four-door Mustang really in the first place, let alone a crossover. And just branding wise, yeah, I think you're completely right that they were worried that if it didn't have some type of pre-existing established name to go off of, then no one would like it or something, which I think is a misconception. I think it's a legacy automakers being afraid that they won't have enough demand or they won't have enough interest. You remember how crappy the EV1 looked? Like the GM EV, and yet people loved that thing. Like there wasn't much pre-existing branding they used on the EV1, and yet everyone who got one was like really trying hard to not let go of it, and they had like a funeral for it when GM took them back and stuff. Like people will buy your EVs. Okay, we see these BMW i3s and people people will buy. It doesn't matter how the design or branding really is. If it's electric, there will automatically be a certain amount of following to it, and ultimately the biggest industry the electric car market is having is not being able to make enough of everything. So that's why it's always funny to me when they're worried about branding throwing off their. It's like you're pretty much just kind of ticking off your pre-existing fan base. You're not really winning people over. Oh, it's electric, the Mach E. I'm not really interested in it. Wait, but it's a Mustang. Oh, really? Oh, now I'm interested. I don't think there's that many people like that.
it's under the Mustang family. So
Yeah.
it's a family of Mustangs, which then makes me think, okay, a family I think is more than like two people or two entities, right?
Right.
So there's going to be more Mustangs in the future.
At this
Potentially?
point, it feels like they gave it the Mustang brand because Mustang means like performance, high speed, and
At low
sporty.
cost.
Yeah, and that means that the electric F-150 is also going to be branded as a Mustang because it's so fast. We had to brand it something. Well, if we call it an electric F-150, no one would want it, so we had to give it some branding boost. The Mustang
Oh,
pickup. It's part of the Mustang family.
I think my wife would be up in arms at that point if they called the new Ford F-150 a Mustang, just because she also, when we were, I mean, for as long as that we've been together, she always wanted a Ford because her parents have a Ford F-350.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, okay, when we get a truck, we should get a Ford because my parents love it. And then just all the problems that Ford has had with their transmissions, at least in recent years, she's like, I don't think I want to deal with that.
My Ford
Yeah,
Ranger died on me because of the transmission. That's why I don't have it to this day, was because the transmission kept going out.
Yeah, and so that's what kind of drove us to the Dodge, because Dodge really, I guess from what we've done with our research, Dodge hasn't had too many problems. Or I guess it's under the Ram name now. It's not even under Dodge anymore. It's
Right.
the Ram 1500. But yeah, anyways, getting back to the Mustang, another thing that I noticed that my wife noticed, she opened the driver passenger door, the front door right there on the right side of the vehicle, and she noticed that there's a whole bunch of door. She's like, this door is huge. And we look and like, there's at least like maybe a little bit less than a foot of metal material hanging off that goes down to like the bottom of the vehicle and actually curves underneath the vehicle a little bit. There's some photos that I've got of it, and it's just like insane the amount of metal that's exposed. And you can kind of see like how they did some weight savings with just making it a little bit more hollow or putting less material into it. But it's a whole lot, like a good chunk of metal that like you could fit your hand in there, and like it's just being pressed up against the bodywork when the door is closed.
Wow.
And then comparing that to the Y, like it's a big door on the Y too as well, but they at least had, I don't know, it seemed like there was a lot less door on the Y than there was the Mach E.
Okay.
It's just insane. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know. Maybe it's just the design-wise how the door was made, or at least like how they wanted it to look on the exterior, and it just so happened to reflect on the interior, just being a lot of bare metal just sitting there. But it was really surprising just seeing the amount of door.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to bring up. I'm looking at your pictures right now, just because I'm curious. But yeah, it's a. Would you say that's a negative design or neutral design, or?
It seems like a lot of wasted metal, I'd say.
Yeah.
I get that the vehicle has its dimensions or whatever, but I don't know, maybe make it so that I don't know. Thinking as an engineer, you don't want to have too much material that you're using.
Right.
If like it's not really being utilized, you want, or, I mean, there's a lot of parts of a system that aren't going to be utilized by the user, but at least with like a door, you don't want it to be too big.
Right.
Enough to where it's banging into other vehicles, or that you could easily, like, if you get in a wreck, that's a whole lot of material that's been destroyed. I don't know. But yeah, just really weird design choice. And another one that I noticed is the door handles when you're exiting the vehicle. They are little tabs. They're not like a regular, or at least in the Model Y, there's a button that you press and the door unlatches and opens. Or in a regular car, it's usually some type of
lever,
tab or something. Yeah, some lever that you're pulling. And this, it's like a little tab that you could see in a Volvo 940 or 740. Just some weird little sliding tabs that open the door, which I felt was they're kind of cute. I liked them.
That's the term. They're cute.
They're cute. I liked them. But it was just also another weird design choice that I noted when I was in the car or exiting the car.
That is interesting. I'm looking at your picture right now. That's a different look. I've never been in a car that has this little slider thing, so that's kind of
it was
unique.
very confusing for a lot of people getting into my 940 that I inherited from my grandpa, because they would be looking at the door trying to get out, like how do I get out of this thing, like where's the door handle, and it's like, oh, there's a tab and you slide it on the rail basically, and it opens the door. Kind of similar to the Mach E. The Mach E is more of on a pivot, kind of almost like a really big like lever, as if like you're playing the slot machine or something, but of course miniaturized. So never mind. Anyways, Another thing I wanted to note is the software. I know that Ford had a lot of issues with software at the beginning with their vehicles, and they were just. It seems like a lot of car companies with their electric vehicles are having issues with software. They're trying to make it smooth and seamless and quick, and it ends up becoming glitchy and weird and has a bit of issues in that regard. The Mustangs was fine. It was noticeably slower than the Y in my point of view.
In what way?
Yeah.
With just how it registered when you touch it, or just like opening menus and stuff?
I would say yes, both.
So
I went to
both ways.
Yeah, I went to go turn on the air conditioning because it wasn't too. It's been warm in the Bay Area, warm enough to where the interior of the vehicle is hot. So I went to go turn on the air conditioning. Very intuitive. It wasn't as bad as what people think. I mean, people like buttons for air conditioning, but with the screen, I'm used to it because I drive the Model Y.
Yeah.
Pressing the buttons was fine. I thought that was fine, but it was a little bit delayed. Like I'd press the button, it'd be maybe a half second before it went, okay, I go up a little bit more. Where with the Tesla, it's very quick. You press and it's like, okay, I'm at 70 degrees, or I'm at 69, 68, or
right.
But with the something that did make me laugh is when I was going to pick up my wife because she parked in a different parking lot because there's no parking at the Ford place because they just have vehicles everywhere. I used the backup camera because I'm like, oh, this is a good chance to use the backup camera. And I forgot that the Mach E has the top-down view of the vehicle as well. So on the screen, it pops up, I think on the bottom end or the bottom side of the screen, your backup camera, but on the top of it, it shows the top-down view of like what it thinks is going on around it.
Yeah.
That turned out to be very helpful in a lot of cases when I was driving, and I was only driving it for about 30 minutes. And I think the 3 or 4 times I backed up with it, it was fantastic. I was able to get into spots that I didn't think I was going to get into, that I was going to have a little bit of trouble. So I liked that part of it, but the backup camera, when I first used it, it kind of shows like where your tires are going to be going, or like where the vehicle's,
the lines,
the path that's potentially going to go.
Right.
So I'm backing up. My wife is with her truck, kind of watching me, and the backup lines start doing this. They start going back and forth and like glitching out. I'm like, I'm just holding the steering wheel. I'm not trying to turn it on. I'm like, what is going on with these lines? They're glitching out everywhere. And so I get into the spot I park, and my wife is just like, you park terribly. I'm like, blame the vehicle. It wasn't me. But thankfully that problem didn't occur again later in the test drive when I backed it up 1 or 2 more times. So there's maybe some issues with that. The sales rep, of course, was acting surprised when he heard that. I'm sure he was surprised. But at least knowing the backstory of Ford and having their issues with the software, it didn't really come too much as a surprise that, oh, yeah, there's a little bit of an issue with the backup camera and the lines. But otherwise, no, the top-down camera type of view, priceless. I would love that in the Model Y.
Oh, good.
That got me into so many different spots that I think was very valuable.
I've seen a lot of people express interest in that top-down view. It gives you a lot more perspective than a traditional just backup camera or even some side cameras, because you could see every edge you're working with, which is, I think, especially with parking larger vehicles like the Cybertruck, that would be quite handy. I'm guessing Tesla's reason for not having it is we'll park ourselves, and we don't need you to park, so the computer can park. But they haven't really redesigned the parking software much lately, which is why most people aren't using it very much, because it's so spotty and slow. And I believe I read somewhere that they still only use the radar, like the nearby ultrasonic sensors for the auto park, and they don't use any of the cameras really for computational, understanding vision. You can see lines, and I think that's why auto park only works between like 2 cars, right? Unless they've updated that. I don't think they have.
No, you're correct. My wife and I, for Valentine's, went to a winery to drink some wine, and they had pizza there, which was nice. But we parked in between a Tesla and I think it was a Mercedes or something like that. And it gave us the auto park. I'm like, oh, yes, we don't get that many options to actually use this. And so we use it, and it does it fine. At 1 or 2 points, it got a little bit close to the Model S. That made me kind of grit my teeth a little bit because, don't hurt the Model S. But it did fine nevertheless. But it
Good.
was pretty funny because it backed up straight and fine in the end, and had good room on both sides for me and my wife to get out. But on the screen on the visualizer that it kind of shows you like the car back up into the spot, instead of like being in line with the two parking lot lanes or whatever, it showed the vehicle cattywampus or a little bit more angled, even though that physically the car knew, yes, I'm in between the lines, this is a good parking spot, or like good parking that I did. But on the visualizer, it's like, I'm basically running into the car on the right side on the back of it, and then running into the Model S on the front left of it. Tesla needs to use more cameras and fix their parking, but they do kind of use that top-down view a little bit in a way of, they've got on the left side of the screen the car, because they always have the car on the left side of the screen with the visualizer and everything, and they show the little bumpers, basically the little bumpers with numbers. So they say, oh, you're about 27 inches away from some object, or 26 and 25, and it decreases, and as you get closer to something, it increases, or its color goes from a yellow to an orange to a red, which is something that my wife really wants and needs in a truck, which is why she's excited about the Cybertruck, because in the Ram she doesn't get that. We have a cheap Ram we got for a good price, but of course it doesn't have all the features, and so seeing maybe something that what Tesla's doing right now, I think would be comparable for the Cybertruck. But something that the Mach E does with like the visualizer of like, oh yes, you can kind of see the car on your left in this view or whatever. You can kind of see where things are. It'd be a lot more helpful for a truck, and I think Tesla should definitely adopt it.
I think there's only so many years they can keep pushing off this. Well, one day the car will do everything itself, but and I know Elon has the mentality of all input is error, but if we're going to take this amount of time to actually get all that ironed out, plus, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't auto park kind of partially part of the FSD thing, or do all Teslas have that? I don't recall. I'm checking the site now.
Yeah, to be fair, I think it does go with the full self-driving package.
Yeah, it says,
I think auto park's part of it.
Full self-driving capability includes auto park, so I don't believe those who don't choose to spend $10,000 on the software will get the auto park functionality anyway. So if the logic is, well, it's okay, the car can park itself, it's like, well, keep in mind most people probably haven't purchased FSD. I'm sure it's a fairly large number of people who have, but not everybody. So having that top-down view, I mean, it would go so seamlessly with the software they already have, showing the different options to open doors, and the top-down view, the Tesla's already there. Just when you're backing up, just stay on that UI so you can see the stuff around you. I don't know. I'm glad the Mach E has
more
that.
Information. Yeah,
sure.
Just add more information to the left side as well, instead of just the colored bumpers and the numbers associated with them. Like add, I mean, they already have the models of like sedans and crossovers in their database. Just add those in. Like make it look like you're backing up into the spot next to two vehicles, or just one vehicle. It doesn't matter. Like the car can detect it. It's got the sensors. Just add a little bit more information. I know that recently Tesla's been under fire with their update with getting rid of information, or at least making more negative space. Utilize that negative space then, at least for like the Model S. It makes a whole lot of sense to put a lot of that information right there in the the heads up display. And then for the 3 and Y, just add one or two more details. Not too hard. But
I agree.
That's one thing that I really admired about the Mach E. I enjoyed that part of it. Like I could back up all day with that car. I thought that was pretty fun. As long as the camera's not wigging out. The range was good as well. I guess I didn't get to mention. It had I guess it was fully topped off when I got into the car. It said 100%. But the range it predicted was, I think, 250 miles. And I believe what the sales rep told me is that the car goes 270 miles. So I guess potentially you could go 270 miles if you drive correctly, or you're going down a hill or something like that.
Oh, gotcha.
But this one had 250, and I think I barely even used 1 or 2 estimated miles on its prediction. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
you
I didn't
barely
drive
put
around
a
too long.
dent in it.
Yeah, no, I just did some city driving. I didn't get the chance to put it on the highway just because I had to go around the block to pick up my wife, and then I thought, okay, well, we only have so much time, and I only have so much time to get footage that Drew will
Yeah.
probably show to you
Well,
guys at some point, or you've already
yeah.
seen.
Well, thanks for filming that. That was cool. I'm glad you were able to document it. I'm looking at them right now, which is fun. The red, I like that red color they went with.
There are
That's a
so
good
many
look.
reds, and that's a color that is default for all Mach E's. That's something that you can get with a non-first edition, which there's no more first editions. You can't get a first edition anymore. So whatever
Correct.
ones that they've made or they are making, that's it. But
Gotcha.
you can go on the site and look at the different colors they have. They have way too many grays, in my opinion, for non-first editions. They got white and then space white, and then they've got charcoal gray and then another gray, and then do they have a black? I don't know if they have a black, but then they've got the red, and then that's it. I'm just like,
I wish
give
the
me more colors.
configurator was more simple. I'm trying to use their website and it's just
It was
it's
okay
kinda,
on mobile.
oh
But
really? Maybe it's
yeah.
every time I go on the order now page for desktop, it's like, what's your local dealer? And I'm like, Ford, I live in the middle of nowhere. Don't I'm not, I just want to play
Yeah,
with your
I find
option.
that interesting as well. They're just like, hey, let's find out where you are so we can match you with a car. And I just think, I just want to configure one.
I know.
Okay, whatever.
That's how I'm
Which
feeling.
then, shortly after you put in the information, they immediately give you the configuration page. And I just think, this is a wasted step.
Yeah, I
At least for
agree.
the consumer.
It's interesting they
get
have
them.
I've never seen Tesla do this, but they do have a standard range all-wheel drive.
Mhm.
I don't recall Tesla ever doing that before. But the range
No.
its target range is 211, which is obviously not great, but you know me, I'm not a range junkie. I'm kind of the type of person that's like, you know that little cheese wedge city car that got 40 miles of range back in the 70s?
Hmm.
I could probably live with that. That would cover my daily driving habits pretty well.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's like if someone wants that acceleration but don't really care that much about road tripping, it's an interesting option that most EV companies don't make.
Yeah, I think that's Ford's biggest advantage compared to Tesla and other companies is that they're able, because they have the money and manufacturing, they can do whatever option they want. I think they've got like 5 different options or 6 different options for like what type of battery / drivetrain you want. And then from there,
Yeah.
that's not even color or interior color or other options. I think I
You are
configured
right. There are a
one for
lot of
my own.
silver.
There's way too many silver.
Carbonized
I think
gray, iconic silver, space white, and there's something called infinite blue metallic tinted clear coat, but it looks very gray. It looks more
Yeah.
like your midnight silver than the electric blue they had before.
Yeah. The service rep did. I mean, this is just from a service rep, and of course, we can't take everything they say to heart,
No.
as we can tell from the Tesla world, where we ask, "Oh, is this coming?" And they say, "Yeah," and then it never comes. Uh,
They
he
don't know.
did
They
say
don't know.
what he thinks, in his opinion, is that Ford might open up more, or they will most likely open up more colors, and he thinks that that blue might make a return, assuming that there's
I hope
a
it
lot
does.
of demand for it. I do too. I really loved it. It reminded me of, I guess, Mustangs in recent years that don't have that Shelby color but have that electric blue color. I love that blue. I think if Tesla adopted that blue, that'd be fantastic. If I had the money, I'd paint my color that color, but I think with dust and everything else, we're like, the Midnight Silver Metallic looks fine on the Y. But
True.
yeah, if I had a chance to get a Mach E, which I think I'd maybe lease a Mach E if like anything. I don't think I'd ever buy a Mach E, but if I had the money and space, I might lease a Mach E just to enjoy it for a couple months and say, this was an interesting experience. But otherwise, yeah, I prefer my Y a lot more. It's got better acceleration at the same price.
Better
I should
handling.
say. But this is
Yeah.
at the same price out the door. I guess this is maybe not out the door because there's the tax incentive that Ford still has.
Yeah, they got
of
$7,500 tax credit. Yeah.
Yeah, and they love flaunting that on the website and also at the dealership.
they do.
Like, oh yeah, you get $7,500 off, and cool. But
Did we
What was I
mention you
gonna
get
say?
7,500? By the way,
By the way, oh, I just lost it. No,
no
yeah,
supercharging. Kind of a
no
bummer.
supercharging. Yeah, okay, so this is what I was getting at. So out like MSRP price, my car and that car are the same price, but my car is full self driving and whatever. Um,
Is your range
but
better
out,
too?
so I've looked at my range recently. It is now at 290 estimated. It's decreased from the 300 that it was originally when I took order
Yeah.
to, or maybe, I think it started at maybe 325 actually, or I forget because they did change the numbers up a little bit.
When they first unveiled that it was 280, then they came forward later and said now it's 316, and then updated it again down the road to 326. So
Yeah, it's
when
at
you
an
took
estimated
delivery,
290
they
right
said
now.
316. Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was 316. I think physically or like more functionally, like or realistically, I should say, it was hitting 300.
Okay.
But now it's hitting 290, which still, I guess, as a reflection of me owning it for a year, in which we could probably do a video on that later. 290
Yeah.
is perfectly fine for an EV. I
Mm-hmm.
drive it around every day, and I charge it up maybe once a week, and the charging doesn't cost too much,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't even have to use the supercharger. I can use my home, and if I have solar, it's basically free energy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not bad. But yeah, for the Mach E, for 270 miles, same price as my car. It's got a little bit worse acceleration, a little bit worse range. Um,
And that's
a
day
little
one
bit less
range.
storage.
You know, we're comparing it
That's day
to your
one, yeah.
Model Y with a year of use range, which is obviously going to be different on the Mach E too. So, but I don't know. I've been reading a lot of reports that Tesla has kind of finely tuned their vehicles to perform really well on the EPA tests, but then other companies always perform worse on the EPA. But when you get the real world tests, they can usually exceed those numbers, whereas Tesla rarely exceeds those numbers. So I'd say it's safe to say they're pretty fairly matched with range.
Yeah,
But
I think
I think
Ford
the
has a
Mach E
really
uses
good
a
product on their hands.
good.
You were gonna say?
I think they use a bigger battery though, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I think the Mach E longer range variants use a 100 kilowatt hour or something pretty close to 100, if I remember correctly. And I'm kind of surprised they're able to stuff a battery that big in a car that price, knowing how rarely
Makes sense with the
Tesla.
door.
With the door. Uh, I'm kind of surprised given how rarely Tesla will stuff 100 kilowatt hours in a car. When they do, it's usually a car about twice the price of the Mach E. So we'll probably never know, but I'd be very curious to know the profit margins on a Mach E compared to a Model Y, knowing how much more intricate some of the interior choices are, as well as things like you said with the excess metal in the doors, or things like the extra battery. Because I don't think these are the most efficient powertrains, and that could have something to do with the default being without regen turned on. I think EPA tests everything at like default mode. They don't change anything. They just test it as it's delivered. So it could be different if you activated one pedal driving or that kind of thing. But the user interface, I can't believe we made it like 50 minutes into this episode and I didn't ask you about the dial. Did you mess around with the dial much? What are your opinions on the dial?
I did not touch that thing at all. Oh, I accidentally touched it once, and that was only because I got confused about how to put the car in park. Because there's a dial for
You touched the
changing
dial
the gear that I did not touch that dial on the screen. I looked at it and I didn't even notice it, honestly, afterward. Because I immediately was like, you know what? I don't care about playing with that dial. I think I rotated it once and it seemed fine, I guess.
I think
because
I would love
accidentally
this car
grabbed for
way
that.
more if it wasn't there. I feel like out of all the things they chose, I actually been playing with the configurator this whole time, and I love the no door handle design. And here's a hot take from a Tesla fanboy. I think Mach E exterior design is arguably a bit better than the Model Y. I think sport-wise, it's a bit more iconic looking, and it has a bit more of an aggressive stealth look on the front. And there's a lot of crappy grills in the EV world, but I would say Ford did a decent job with that kind of where the Mustang logo is, but it's got a bit of a ring around it. I think the Bolt EUV copied that design now as well. It's like,
The
gotta
handlebar
have
mustache.
something. Yeah, the handlebar mustache. Brake lights, I've seen some people say they don't like.
They're weird.
I kind of
I'm
think
fine with that.
I think they kind of look okay, but I mean, they
See them up close. It definitely looks like a Mustang brake light. Even in pictures, you're like, oh yeah, that's a typical Mustang brake light. But actually seeing it up close, it just looks like maybe a smaller version of it. Maybe because it's on a bigger vehicle. They could be the same
Yeah, could
lights,
be it.
possibly.
Yeah,
That'd be a nice cost-cutting technique that Ford could use. I don't think that they're actually doing it though.
no.
But no, I mean, yeah, I guess going back to the dial, I only touched the Prindle dial, the Prindle being the park, reverse, neutral, drive. I guess they don't have low anymore necessarily. I like calling it the Prindle. But yeah, that thing, I guess it was okay. Like, I guess driving the car, like if I just had one hand on the wheel and one arm kind of just rested on the armrest, it was comfortable. But yeah, kind of going into the whole situation of like backing up, that was the only part that was a little bit like, where do I reach? Because I guess I'm more used to my Tesla. It's all right.
Sure.
You tap up on the gear stock,
And soon you'll just do nothing.
Be a thing. Yeah, soon you'll do nothing. But with the Model Y, you just do the gear stock, in which I did that on the Mach E, and then the windshield wiper started going like, oh, no. And then I pushed that
Drives
down.
a Tesla
and then
for
like,
a year, goes back, like,
oh my goodness,
setting
and then
off all the
I'm
music.
Like, okay. Just
the
in my head, I'm
front's
like,
opening.
okay, there's a dial that I have to spin, and I reach forward, and I'm like, oh, there's a dial, and then of course it's the screen dial, and I'm like, wait, no, that's not right. Oh, it's the one on the bottom. That was the only kind of confusing part, which someone would get used to. This was me in the car for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it wasn't too
I
much
think-
of a turn off, I guess.
The main reason I get deterred from the dial is, did you ever interact with the screen and try to type something in? Like an address?
I never tried typing in, but moving around it. Honestly, I didn't get too much time with the user interface, but the brief time that I did, I was a little bit confused on like where to tap and what to do, because
Well, sure.
by default, or at least in the vehicle that I was in, it wasn't showing the map. It was just all of like the driver options, like air conditioning and other things. It didn't have the map. I'm like,
Even when you're driving around, there's no map?
so you can change that to navigation. What you
Yeah.
have to do is tap on like the little buttons on the, I think either top right or the top middle of the screen, like basically ellipsy dots, and then from there, it shows like I think 2 rows of options of things you could tap on, like call someone, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, some other things, and then one of them is navigation. So I tapped on that, and the map is small. At least I don't. Again, I didn't really play with it too much, but it only took up, I think, the top half of, or maybe not even the top half, maybe the top third of the screen. So it wasn't too much map compared to like the Tesla, where it gives you, or at least it used to give you 2/3 of the screen. Now it kind of gives you maybe like 2/5,
60%
of the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because
somewhere
the
around
main
there.
reason I'm a big fan of having a large centered display in a vehicle is because displays are dynamic input, right? You can change whatever's on there to whatever the use case is, whether it's I'm driving and I need directions, or I need to mess around with some settings, or I want to play video games, or I want to watch Netflix. The display can do all that. And that's why displays are so popular. We put them on watches, we got them on our tablets, on our computers, on our phones, is because they can do so many things. And when you put a physical override on top of that dynamic interface, it severely impacts how dynamic that part of the interaction can really be. So I guess that's why the dial bothered me so much, is because I was like, that part of the screen should be where the keyboard is. Or, if you're getting directions, if you want to have like your step by steps at the top or bottom, doesn't really matter, and then the map on top. Now you have to incorporate that dial across every aspect of the software, which severely limits the functionality of it, or not even functionality, but just all the things you can do with it. But outside of that, most of the design I'm a pretty big fan of. Like, I think it's a great looking vehicle, and I like a lot of the design choices they make to kind of give it that iconic look, because honestly, there's so many electric crossovers now, and it sounds like we're just going to get more for the next couple of years. There's just more automotive brands that are like, well, this is a popular segment, this is what's selling, and electric's the future. So if we're going to go electric, we should probably start with a crossover. And I think Ford did a good job making one that kind of stands out from the crowd of it's a very big crowd of electric crossovers. So I like a lot of the choices they made, and that's the one thing that I'm just like, oh, you idiot. Why? Like, that severely limits so much, and you can't really software update that off.
No. Though I would say, to be fair, I didn't interact with it that much in that 30 minutes. I never really needed it. Though I guess I didn't really listen to any music or didn't change a radio station or anything else. Or, yeah, because even with the climate control, it wasn't a dial. It was a feature on the screen that it was almost like a, oh goodness, like a point that you kind of slide up or down a scale. And then there's like a little color palette as well on that scale that shows, okay, you slide it down, it's cold. You slide it up, it's hot.
I see.
So like even the dial wasn't factoring in there. Maybe there's a setting that you can make it so that the air conditioning goes to that dial, I guess. But I never
user
used
interface wise, would you say the Tesla is still in the lead here?
So again, this is more of my opinion because I've been driving a Tesla for a year. And it shouldn't come as a surprise. Yes, I enjoy the Tesla's user interface more, but I think Ford is catching up, at least in terms of speed, because I've driven Fords before and their user interface was terrible, very slow and clunky, and because it was mainly third party,
I see.
It made sense. Where now this is kind of going a little bit. I don't know if they're going still third party or if they went more first party in this regard. But it felt like a really good improvement compared to years ago with all the different, well, I guess years ago, previous attempts at a user interface similar to Tesla's. But yeah, I mean, the one thing that did catch me off guard was getting the Tesla. There's no power button. You don't press a power button to turn it on, quote unquote, even though the car's already on. With this, you press a button that's right behind the steering wheel, and then it does the silly, crazy animation of. I'm just so flustered, I guess. But this, yeah, with
gives you that little Disney intro.
Basically, you can see it in a couple shots as well. When you open any orifice of the car, and it just is like, oh, you want to watch this movie again? I'm like,
any
no.
orifice. Oh man,
I don't know what happens when you open the charge port, but yeah, with at least the driver door, the passenger door, or the tailgate, it plays the animation. I'm just thinking, how many times is this animation going to be played? In the life of the car, when people could have just skipped it, and people could actually just get in the car and drive, which is what they want. They don't want to watch a movie when they get in the car unless they're stuck in the car. Like, I guess a good example is during COVID times, and you're trying to get medical attention for your pet. There's a lot of wait times these days, and so what's nice with the Tesla is you could just watch Netflix. And you have a nice big screen on there that is landscape, so you can watch the whole movie. Oh, look, another noise.
I hear that noise
More
a lot
noises.
these days. my wife's windows.
That's noise
PC.
that was supposed to turn off. But
I'm looking at your interior shot right now. It's a little button heavy for me, but overall pretty good looking. It's a step in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, I came in knowing that there's going to be buttons and dials in there, and I felt, okay, well, I just want to see how this car drives and stacks up to the Model Y in that regard, because, of course, I'm going to be a little bit more biased against how many buttons there are in there. I'm a big no-button guy. I don't like all the buttons. Like, you put me in
Me neither.
My Ram 1500. It's just like there's too many buttons in here, and like this is a base level Ford F-150, or not Ford F-150.
Yeah.
Again, I don't drive a Ford. I drive a Ram 1500. There's too many.
You got to
buttons
remember
in
this,
it.
Mike. Yeah, and
So
some
excited
people
about
are
the
like,
Ford, I guess.
I don't want to interact with software because a button gives my finger more physical feedback. I understand that. First of all, I have a bias against that because my car has no display. It's all buttons and knobs for everything, and the knobs and buttons suck huge. And the same thing in my dad's truck. I drove his Toyota Tacoma not too long ago, and both on my car and his car, the volume knob is completely busted. So if you're trying to adjust the volume, it will either go up when you're trying to make it go down, or when you try to make it go the other way, it does nothing. So you have to default to, thank God they put multiple input methods, because you have to change the volume on the steering wheel, because now that knob is completely useless. And in my car, the cruise control button is working less and less. I have to press it like 10 times to get it
no.
to actually set. So this is my hate against buttons. It stems from a moving part is a potential point of failure. So if we can scrap that and just the software can fail, but if it's failing, everything's failing. So there's a there's a bit more of an override, and I feel like it's less common and more fixable. There's more software updates you can patch and be like, okay, now it's more stable. Now the software won't crash as much. Whereas a button that's busted, there's nothing over the air that can easily swap that out or fix that. So that's what my bias against buttons comes from. I think it's just so many of them failing on me. I'm like, get all that stuff's gonna break in 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't
But
know.
otherwise, I guess overall, the Mustang Mach E, good product for like anyone who's not in the market for a Tesla but wants to go electric. I think it's a perfect product for them. If they want something that's sporty yet nice, like it seems luxury with like the stitching or whatever they do.
Yeah.
Or whatever user interface they've got, it looks nice. It's a comparable product compared to the Model Y. Even though that my bias would be just go for the Tesla. Kind of like what you were saying, I think, in the last EV podcast. Like, just save up for a Tesla, and if you can't buy a Tesla, buy a beater, and then just get a Tesla later.
Right.
I think this is a fine product. I think people will enjoy this. I think Ford, if they play their cards right, have a hit product that a lot of people are going to love. They just have to fine tune it a little bit more. And yeah, it was a fun drive, and I enjoyed the 30 minutes that I had with the vehicle. And that, again, I can't stress that blue, amazing. I love that color.
That's a great color option. So am I safe in assuming, heaven forbid something happened to your Model Y and you were looking to replace it, is the Mach E up for consideration?
No. Even I've asked my wife multiple times, like, what would happen if the Model Y just got into a horrific crash? I was fine. Everything was fine, but the Model Y was just totaled.
What would you buy
What
if
we-
I died?
What would we do? And she's just like, well, I love the Tesla, so we would just buy another Tesla. I'm like, would we buy a 3? Would we buy an S, like a beater S or something like that? Because we wouldn't be able to afford it necessarily. She's let's just go for a Y again. I'm like, okay, would you want to go, like, if Tesla potentially had like the whole almost like Model 3 lineup that they had a while back with the standard range, the long range, the all-wheel drive, and the performance, like, which one would you go for then? She's like, we'll just go for our car again. Like, I think
Just
it's
replace
the perfect
it
product.
with the same exact vehicle if you didn't have a Tesla today and you had to buy a Tesla again, you would have still bought the same one you have today.
With my wife having a heavy influence on the purchasing decision,
Of
yes,
course.
we would be getting a Model Y again.
Gotcha.
But I think the Mach E definitely has a
Market?
community, a market. Yeah, a community. It has a market, and I think it'll do really well. Or at least in my opinion, I think it'll do really well, assuming that Ford doesn't muck it up too much.
Yeah, me too. I think they did a great job for a first attempt at an electric crossover, knowing the issues they've had with software in the past, and they're not super into EVs, maybe compared to a VW or even a GM with a Bolt type thing. So this is a great starting point. And if there was something, if there were some things you could tell them to change, what would you suggest?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that question. Well, I guess
Okay,
for one,
I didn't ask.
get rid of the knobs. I don't like the knobs. I mean, if you're going to put a knob in, make it for radio or for air.
I don't mind
air
it on the
conditioning.
steering wheel, the little scroll wheels. Those are fine.
Oh yeah, I think those are fine. But like, I don't know. There's two knobs really close to each other, one on the screen and one on kind of like below your hand. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
they're spaced enough apart to where you won't get them too confused. But they're at least in that region where my right hand goes to reach
Sure.
forward. And it's like, do I reach forward to the screen or do I reach forward to the one on the
It's a
bottom
bit
surface?
input redundancy.
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah. I mean, it's more of two identical inputs close to each other that do different things. One's
Right.
for volume and then one's for shifting the car. I would think
Yeah, it's just
getting rid
when
of
you're at a
the-
higher speed, one becomes less useful.
Yeah. So I think maybe doing something with that and or moving that dial somewhere else for the changing the mode of driving from park to neutral to whatever. Maybe putting it where the on-off button is. I don't think the Mach E needs an on-off button. I know people like the idea of turning off their car, but the car is still on. I think it's more simple just to get out of the car, which I like with my
I
Y,
agree.
which I
Yeah.
forget with the Ram because I get out of that. Like I have to make a mental check when I'm opening the door of the Ram to get out. I'm like, what do? I guess I have to take the key
Right.
out. That's right. There's a key. Where with the Mach E, there's also a key. There's a fob, which you can skip that with the phone key as well, which I like.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I think getting rid of that on-off button, moving the dials, and then maybe adding more space in the trunk would be nice. I think
Fair
Ford
enough.
definitely needs to add more space back there. I don't know whether there is a tire or not. I forget. Maybe my photos can give
It's
a
probably
little-
just
little
because
bit
the
more
battery's so
clarification.
big.
Yeah, I think that's
That
also
could
the
be it.
reason for the doors being so big as well, because the battery's just so big. There's so much space underneath, so it makes sense. But yeah, that and then also the frunk divider, making that a little bit easier to take out. Because currently, right now, it seems like it's a chore just to take it out, and then it gives you less incentive to put it back in or just to take it out in general. So I think fixing those, and then I think the range is fine. I think the acceleration is fine. I don't think they need to improve it. If they do some software updates, good on them.
Yeah.
Maybe
Better
stiffening
efficiency
up-
would be appreciated.
Yeah, maybe stiffening up the steering a little bit more to make it feel a little bit more sporty would be helpful. Maybe
Okay.
there's a setting that I missed. If I did, let me know. But otherwise, yeah, I think stiffening up that steering wheel will make it a whole lot more fun to drive. It'll make it more exhilarating, a more defined product compared to either
Yeah.
older Mustangs or just Ford products, maybe in general.
Well said. Well, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you taking the time to check it out, and I'm glad we were able to document it. This was fun.
Thank you. Yeah, this was great. Hopefully, maybe the ID4 comes to the Bay Area and I can
That would be
take
cool.
a look at that. And
Yeah.
yeah, maybe hopefully in the near future, you and I can get into the Model S at some point, the new one, whenever
Fingers
those
crossed.
get kicked out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're hoping
And
real
you-
soon.
You could possibly hear my wife in the background if she joins us screaming
Awesome.
about the yoke not being there and getting rid of it. But that's another story for another day. Thank you
Another
for
day.
having me, Drew. I appreciate being on.
No problem. Have a great one, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.